that we are dealing with regularly. So I'm going to ask Nadine to take over from here.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, excellent. I mean, is it really a meeting if someone's not muted? But so to get started, just a little bit on my background in conflict resolution. Uh, Partly family background. I come from a blended family, three religions, four cultures, and lots of navigating around different things. And now we have half of us in Canada and half in the US. So even more things to work around. And that led me to my last course in my master's degree. I took my master's degree at University of Toronto, but I did my last course at the University of Calgary. And I left statistics to the end, which I kind of needed to do to be able to really focus and understand it. And I did it over the Summer Institute, 3 full weeks, full days of statistics. So that's something I'll never do again. But what it led to was at the end of the summer session, they had a debrief and a huge conflict broke out in a room full of facilitators, 50, 60 facilitators, no one facilitating. And I looked around and I realized, oh my goodness, I'm the only person here that this has no outcome for. I just, I'm a visiting student, so whatever they decide, they were working through some budget cuts. And so I got up and started putting pros and cons on a flip chart. And so out of that, I got offered a part-time job at USC, which was very helpful. I still teach with them and conflict resolution, of course. And I got invited to different organizations to help them with conflicts. And over time, I started to see some patterns in the kinds of conflicts I was working with. And then I got into coaching, leadership and executive coaching. And I would say probably the number one issue, pretty close, is a conflict, an interpersonal conflict with someone else, their boss, or you wouldn't believe how many people, one side of how many people's divorces I've heard about. So I was delivering my conflict course, and I still deliver it for the University of Calgary, for the City of Calgary, various energy companies, and so on, healthcare organizations. And so what I've done is kind of cherry picked from that information what I thought would be most useful to you. So let me run through the agenda and the learning objectives, but I sure like to get some input from you folks around what could we focus on that make this time really valuable for you. So a little bit on what is conflict, what are the concerns and the causes of it, what are some principles to follow, some steps, why is this behavior the way it is, understanding some of the motivations there. And then I was thinking that if you follow the statistics I've read, at least 1 in 10, if not 2 in 10, of these breakups will have at least one person, if not both, that are considered to be very high conflict. So I wanted to touch on that because everything that works with the other 90% doesn't work with this 10% core. So I wanted to walk through some skills and tools to help deal with that. So my idea is learn more about those behaviors, have more skills and tools available to you. Um, and maybe none of this is new, but if not, hopefully a great refresher. And my goal would be to have less stress in those situations and hopefully better outcomes. So having said that, could I feel free to unmute or put something in the chat? What are some things you would like if I could cover that would make this time really worthwhile for you? Like I know you get a credit, but what else would make it really worthwhile? Is there anything in particular?
I guess we're going to let you lead the way. I certainly think that we could all benefit from if somebody triggers us, how do we keep ourselves under control?
Absolutely. Okay, good. Thank you. I've got that covered. Okay, excellent. And it's not a speak now or forever hold your peace. Please feel free if something, I'd love for this to be interactive. So if you have a question as we're going through, please do ask it. Um, Deal with difficult behaviors from both clients and coworkers. Yes, yes. Yeah, and I'm sure it must be frustrating to you when you recommend something to someone and they choose a completely illogical option. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, thank you. Okay, so am I saying we shouldn't have conflict? No, I mean, conflict is telling you that something needs to be better aligned. but the actual issues themselves might be benign or quite neutral. It's how we handle it. So most of us are afraid of confrontation for good reason. Physiologically, our brains are telling us, uh-oh, something's about to happen here. And, end of the day, we're still mammals. And so we worry about conflict and confrontation as being a precursor to violence, which I hope you don't have to see very much of that. Okay, so I have another thing in the chat. When to know it's time to pass the client on to someone else with better mental health tools and knowledge? Oh, great question. Um, the short answer right now is when you start to feel overwhelmed and you've tried some strategies. My boss used to say 3 good faith tries, and then we have a deeper problem than we understand. So I'll walk you through some things to try, and then you can let me know your feedback if that's going to be helpful or not. Okay, so that's what we're worried about. If we handle the conflict poorly, will it just get worse? So key principles, and this is by this I mean how we handle ourselves as we're going through conflict. And the temptation always is, of course, to drag the professional into the conflict on behalf of one side or the other. So this first point, it applies even to the first 30 seconds. Increase your understanding before you act or react in the moment. Because sometimes when someone wants to draw you in, they'll throw a grenade your way. So, for example, they'll say something about you, your appearance, or you're late, or whatever. And I always like to think now, and I have had to train myself to do this. Why this? Why now? Why are they saying this now? So just kind of take a deep breath and increase your understanding. These get harder, by the way, because you go down. The second one, maintain dignity and respect, is um, sometimes we mirror others' behaviors, right? So if they're being respectful, it's almost automatic to want to be disrespectful back. But the suggestion here is that you model the appropriate behavior. You're kind of a leader in the situation. And if we do that, that's calming for other people. And I always want to look back and think, okay, I handle myself well as I could in the moment. And I've had to get away from this idea of fairness. It's not fair to be respectful to them because they're not being respectful to me. I just am respectful. That's my value. Okay, so develop and maintain awareness of your own reactions, feelings, and impact in the situation. So, am I being helpful in this situation? And this is maybe to Renee's question around, am I being helpful in this situation? Well, this is improved, that's improved. Maybe I am being helpful. Or I've put a ton of energy and time into this and it's not getting better. I think we need some different kinds of help. So part of that is for how am I doing with this situation? Part of it is for your learning going forward. I feel like, we have an hour and a bit here today, and I teach a 1 day course for the university. And I feel like this is a subject that over time we learn about over and over in different ways and in different contexts. So, okay, so I have a couple other questions. Insecurity, yes, for sure. And it's a very uncertain situation as well. How to deal with clients that blame the professionals for everything rather than taking responsibility. Absolutely. I have a huge section on that, and I can also refer you to some follow-ups. There's so much more work that's been done on this in the last 15 years. It is so helpful. Okay, so one of the things we have to be aware of, and I'm sure you're already aware of this, is what are the behaviors we're seeing and what's going on under the surface. So I put in some of the behaviors I thought you would see, and please add in the chat any that I've missed. But you see various kinds of fighting, whether that's yelling, withholding information, or very passive aggressively forgetting the documentation every time, or there could be conflict in that way. Withdrawal is also a symptom of conflict, might be harder to spot. Childhood trauma, yes, that can absolutely be part of it. So I captured what are some of the things leading up to this situation. You'll see the behaviors on the surface, but below it, we'll see, what stage of life are people at? What's their family situation? What's their money situation? What's their culture? So just to share with you, when I was at university, my husband lived in London and I lived in Toronto, and I had to rent an apartment for cheap because we were paying for 2 places. I actually had to walk through another family's home to get to my apartment on the top floor. And this family fought every day in another language, which unfortunately for me, I understood some of it. And I'd have to pass by the mom who would be standing in the doorway like this, frowning as you went by. And that was their family, seemed to be the family norm, constantly fighting. So you have that all the way to the other end of the continuum where there's no fighting, and that's maybe not a healthy thing either. But below that context, we have interpersonal. How do these people in this situation relate? How are they accustomed to relating? Worldview clashes. Yes, thank you, Al. And then finally, down at the very bottom, what are the intrapersonal things going on? What is this person's personality like? What are their values? What is their identity or ego? And when we get what we call an identity quake or an identity clash, that's where we're going to have the most passionate and not in a good way kinds of disagreements. So when you're seeing the behaviors on the surface, it's good to pay attention to those and ask, okay, what is this telling me? And I appreciate as well Renee's earlier question, only as much as you need to understand for the situation. It's not, you don't have to be the therapist or, fix things, although you might suggest helpful things. Communication styles, absolutely. Extroverts want to put it all out on the table and talk it through. Introverts want to go away and think about it, and it might be hard to drag them to a meeting. Carl, please, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, it was interesting. We had a file not that long ago where we had a doctor, and it was constantly where he would interrupt and then tell us his opinion. And so one day we were just sitting there waiting because we'd done a breakout room, and he mentioned about how irritating it is that he constantly has to interrupt his clients to be able to tell them what's wrong with them because they just want to come there and tell them his life story. And so myself and the family profession, we look at each other going, well, shit, that explains everything. That's just who you are. So
Yeah.
it's not, and that light bulb went off and we recognized, okay, so this is how he communicates. So it's not him being disrespectful in the process. He's just so accustomed to that he has to interrupt to get his point across because he's only got that 10, 15 minutes with the client.
Oh, helpful. So interesting. That
Yeah.
is a great example of understanding their context and how it's contributing. Yeah. Yeah. And we interpret from the behavior that we see, we interpret something, but it might not be the right interpretation. So again, always good to ask and, talk about the context. I was working with an oil and gas company, and one of the questions I got, when it's a boom in oil and gas, they hire people from all over the world. So it's very different cultures merging. And I've learned so much from this. And I had one person pull me aside and say, I don't know what to do with the South American people. They're always arguing. Well, one half of my blended family is Hispanic. And, all this arm waving and raised voices and fast talking and talking over one another, that is a cultural norm. That's just talking as far as they're concerned. So there could be cultural norms going on there as well. Maturity, emotional maturity plays a big role in this. How willing someone is to self-reflect. All of those have a big impact, and we'll get into that a little deeper as we go. Okay, so what's going on? Now, I took a guess at these things, so tell me what I've missed here. But I was thinking that if people feel they're already in an adversarial system or adversarial process, and this might not be our legal system or even a no court divorce kind of thing, it might be the families. So I had an experience where I was selling my house to my brother, which was not a good idea in retrospect. And he and I didn't want to have any fighting. My sister-in-law's family considered themselves a stakeholder, and they got right in there with what they thought the price should be and winners and losers and so on. And it took us a good 3, 4 years to sort that out amicably. So whether or not the people involved wanted to be adversarial, others around them may be making that. Money, of course, one of the most difficult issues to talk about, and people confuse love and money all the time. They confuse their ego and identity with how much they have. So it takes on that extra added weight. Potentially, as someone mentioned, childhood trauma. Maybe there's trauma right now. Maybe there's parental alienation going on. Maybe the sides are very polarized by the time you get to see them. Lack of skills, education, and resources. Let me do a quick thing in the chat here. What percentage of your clients do you think have had any training in how to work through a conflict? So give me some guesses there. You can just put it in the chat. 0, 10%, 0, 0, 0, 5%. Okay. 25% are in therapy. Okay, that's helpful. 15%. Okay. So it's very low, right? And their partners that they're trying to resolve with, what do you think their level of training is? Would you guess probably the same? Yeah, 0, -0. 0 for most men. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so this is part of the issue is that that training isn't out there. I was super fortunate in that I was volunteering for a social service agency when my husband and I got engaged, and they offered us pre-marriage counseling, and one as free as part of my volunteer benefits. And one of the things we learned was how to fight properly, and I think that's such a useful skill, and most people don't get that, right? So, okay, what resources do they have? Substance abuse. Oh, and I forgot to say, when I was researching for this, I learned that secret debt is also a huge source of issues. Mental illness, and in particular, I'm going to talk a little bit about personality disorders here, but just a little bit, just enough for those of us who are not psychologists to understand the behaviors and figure out how we navigate around those. Um, I forgot to mention the reason how I got into this high conflict behavior, and it was because of a coaching client. And she said to me, "Look, I know the company has given me as a coach for my leadership development, but unless I can get myself sorted out as far as my family life, I'm not going to be a leader anymore. So can you help me figure out what in the bleep is going on with my husband?" So here, this formerly corporate middle class guy was now driving a Harley, doing all kinds of drugs, out all night, out for a couple of days at a time, spending money like crazy. So in researching that, that's how I got involved in all of this. And I've just found the skills and the information so helpful. One of the things I've noticed is that each of us comes to a situation with some expectations for what is good behavior. So treating everyone with respect, collaborating, courteous. What else? What else do you think we expect from the other person? What are we expecting in order to make a good agreement? Anything I've missed here? What would you think as, table stakes? What's the basics here? Is it being willing to listen? What is it? Anything I've missed there? Open-minded. Yeah, yeah. Willing to hear someone else's perspective. Yeah. Yeah. And here again, though, I would say that we've had no training in this. And I mean, this is why they put parents through respect in hockey courses. I actually was asked to help a couple who was their son and they were being so badly bullied by other hockey parents. Anyway, I don't know if that's the case that preceded it being mandatory in my province for all parents to take a respect in hockey course. Ungrateful, reciprocity. You expect some reciprocity, but you see lack of gratitude, right? Yeah. So we can't assume we're going into this with the same expectations. In fact, we're probably not. Okay. So let me know from your point of view, what behaviors do you consider difficult? Think about the last time you felt a client was being really difficult, or the client's spouse, if you had to deal with them directly, or ex, if you had to deal with them directly. What behaviors do you find personally difficult to deal with? Indecision. Thank you, Eva. That's a great one. Okay. What else? Blaming. Okay. And I think someone else said as well, lack of taking responsibility, directive, arrogance. So by directive, they're telling the other person what to do, and maybe you as well, or they're trying to. Okay. Stubbornness, fear of change. Yes, yes. Unresponsive. Yeah, in the literature, that's called stonewalling, and it's one of the most harmful things for relationships. Client who goes MIA as we are getting close to resolution. This client has addiction issues. We keep trying to get coaches involved. Yes, yeah, I can certainly appreciate that. I have a client right now who I think is having a disagreement with her husband, even though he's passed 2 years ago, because he left her his business and she never wanted to be a leader. So she's gone MIA. I'm almost ready to drive over to her office and see if she's okay. Lawyers who go MIA don't respond to emails. Yeah, right. Well, if you here's the advice I got from a lawyers group when I was working with them. If you have not had a response to 3 emails, again, 3 good faith tries, it's time to try another method of communication. Phone, go in person, whatever, um, up the ante, make it a more powerful form of communication. And you have to show them why it's important to you and also that you won't go away till it's done. Okay, so thank you for that list. I've got some here as well. Um, Tell me if you disagree with any of these. High emotions. In professional situations, I think we come to realize there are going to be some emotions, but we can manage some. But if they get extremely kind of out of the norm, that's where we get a little nervous. So emotional response that's poorly modulated. So someone who feels quite entitled to yell or can't stop crying. I remember witnessing I'm not going to name the family members here, but I remember witnessing a fight between 2 different styles. And the dialogue went something like, I can't talk to you when you're just crying like that. Stop crying. Well, I can't stop crying if you're yelling at me. So, here we have the deadlock, right? Blaming personal attacks does not take responsibility. This is a characteristic of a high conflict personality, and it can be a characteristic of any of us if we're in a really difficult situation, which I would argue for many people, a divorce is probably one of the most difficult things they'll go through. Unable or unwilling to receive feedback can be very difficult. I don't know if you've ever heard this term splitting, where one day you're like the hero and you're going to fix everything, and then you disagree with them, and the next day you're off the list. Um, Withholding information, important information, creating the rules and only disclosing after the rules have been violated. So I expected that communication in verbal and written format, but only telling you after it hasn't been done. Shunning or, withdrawing or disappearing or flooding you with request after request. Anything on here that doesn't resonate for people? Okay, have you seen these behaviors? Anybody who has their screen on, if you can give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Yeah, you've seen those? Yeah, okay. All right, so how to recognize quickly what it is we're dealing with. And what I've learned is that the one source of grounding and power you might have in a situation with someone who's pretty close to out of control is to understand the behaviors and what they're telling you about the person's internal state. So my source for a lot of this is Bill Eddy with the High Conflict Institute. Quick bit of history here. Bill Eddy he's a lawyer now. He was a mediator before that and a social worker before that. And he found that when he got to be a lawyer, he noticed some of the same kinds of personalities that he dealt with when he was a social worker. But when he was a social worker, those individuals would be in trouble with the law. But when they had money, they would frequently be in court and often win. And so he's paired up with a therapist named Randy Kruger, and they've done a lot of work on what he calls high conflict personalities. And a lot of what's been useful to me has come from him. And just a side note here, he published his first book, High Conflict People in Legal Disputes, here in Calgary. It was self-published, and he did it with a collaborative lawyer that I knew. And so I got to, go to the book signing when he did his first book. But now he's got a whole institute, and it's a great place for free resources, also paid resources, also courses, and you can get a one-on-one consult as well. Of course, it's not inexpensive, but they know what they're talking about. So what he says is look for the acronym WEB. So what kind of language? Is it all or nothing? If we don't get this sorted out, I'm out of here. Or if we don't get this done by Friday, you're not getting anything. That kind of language. You may be thinking of some political figures that have this characteristic. Emotions not well managed, fearful or enraged, and behavior that's kind of beyond the pale for what most people would do. Okay, so far, how am I doing? Any comments, questions? And if I'm fine to go ahead, I will. Okay. Okay, so what is the impact? And I would ask you, what's the impact to you when you see these behaviors? How does it affect you? So you come out of a meeting with a person who's manifested these difficult behaviors. How are you feeling? So put something in the chat. Um, I will tell you that for sure the X has anticipatory anxiety every time they have to meet with this person, which means they're anticipating it ahead of time. Drained, yes, absolutely. It takes a ton of energy. And it helps sometimes if you go into it with the expectation that, hey, this is going to take energy. I have to eat my spinach and Wheaties today, so I can go in full strength. Anticipatory anxiety, unfortunately, it amplifies the stress of the event. Triggering, my ex was a complete narcissist. Oh, thanks, Terry. We actually are going to talk about those characteristics. In fact, we are already talking about them. Okay, so avoiding ruminating, that waking up in the middle of the night and you're still thinking about the problem and thinking about it. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience where a client wants to tell you the story again and again and again. And ruminating is, again, harmful. I've experimented a bit with what to do with ruminating. And typically now what I do is let someone tell me the story, like what happened. But then when they start to tell more aspects of the story and get more upset about what has occurred, I redirect. I say, I understand this is really upsetting. And now we need to figure out how to get you some relief. So you continually have to redirect to the positive future. It sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. If that doesn't work, I actually say to them, look, this is ruminating and it's doubling your stress. So it's increasing the stress of the original event and it's not moving you to action. Carl, funny enough, I just had an intake with a wife who told me she almost canceled because she didn't want to talk to a man about finances, as she was afraid it would be like it is with her ex. Oh, heartbreaking. Thank you for sharing that, though. That's again part of the context that we're dealing with, right? Okay, so what are some of the skills? And we're going to go through some of these, and I'm going to offer some tools as well. And please bounce them against your own experience because that's how we test what might or might not work for you. So one of the things we have to do is be able to analyze, okay, what's going on here? What does my client need at the end of the day? Are they even aware of their own interests? I have to keep my emotions managed. I'll talk to you about the wise mind technique, but managing emotions I've put first because unless we're managing our emotions, we cannot access the logical part of the brain. So that's kind of first in my mind. Being able to listen even while actively disagreeing with that arrogant, you know what, sitting right in front of you. It's, oh my gosh, I'll give you an example from my professional context. I got called by an organization that has quite a high profile, and their CEO is kind of publicly famous. And the chair of the board of directors said to me, we need to get two things. We need a coach for the CEO, and we need a respectful workplace workshop. And I said, well, given what you've told me, let's not run a respectful workplace workshop because it'll backfire. Employees will go, how come I have to be respectful when he's the problem? So the CEO apparently was really difficult to work with. The board of directors cycled out every year. This layer of management under him cycled out every year. And yet he was beloved by the public. So what we compromised on is we would give a workshop to the board of directors with the CEO there. And I'm doing my thing, and he's leaning forward. He appears to be engaged. And then he turns to everyone around him and he goes, are you getting this, people? This is good stuff. Are you picking it up? And the size of the eye rolls in the room. Oh my gosh, what a group of professionals that kind of held their cool through that. But that's the kind of thing I'm sure you have to deal with. Okay, questioning without creating defensiveness. I'm going to show you some options around validating statements, EARS formula, and some wording for disagreeing constructively. So, okay, so I'm coming up to here is something I want you to think about. But the first, I'm kind of going through this as, here we are coming into this situation, something happens, so kind of following the situation all the way through. And someone mentioned triggered. The triggers are really important to notice, but they're small and irritating at the beginning. They're not necessarily full-blown conflict. And if you're in a rush and you've got lots of things going on, you might not notice the first couple things. But I would say we need to notice our own triggers to be aware of others. So 3 kinds of triggers. Physical, we all have those. Hunger, anger, pain, end of a long day, traffic, all of those things can trigger us. Triggering our values or emotions. So, for example, if you put arrogance as annoying to you, then your value is respect, humility. And when you see that being trampled, that triggers us. And what's going on in the situation? Are we near a deadline? Do we feel we've been rejected? Is someone going completely out there? What's going on in our situation? I put here the Snickers guy for you. So this diagram, this is a person who's basically calm. And I kind of am visualizing it as concentric circles, right? So we have verbal and nonverbal behaviors we see on the outside, but we all have a rational layer, most of us, that we're processing our decisions through. And we all have feelings, no matter how rational we are, whether we're Sheldon Cooper or not. We all have feelings. It's just we deal with them differently. And people who are on the more logical side tend to not necessarily let their feelings make the decision. And people on the feeling side are more guided by their values. And it doesn't mean either is right or wrong. It means we need to understand each other and what is the basis for making decisions. And at the bottom, deeper layer is our values, our personality, identity. So who we are, how we were brought up, our faith, tradition, um, all of those things. And this is the piece, the values piece that we assume others have, which they may not. So, word of the day, ego or identity. It's when the ego or identity gets involved that we find the really kinds of conflicts that hook you. So, what can happen is what we call an identity quake or amygdala hijack is the other word, basically a reaction or an outburst. And, I've been learning about this for years and there's still more to learn. But basically, the purpose of an emotion, it's your brain warning you to pay attention. It's telling you something important is happening, and how you interpret it makes a great deal of difference. So I love the example about, interrupting, that this doctor felt he had to talk to people to make the most of his 10, 15 minutes. Once you got to know him and you had a chance to ask those questions and learn that about him, yes, absolutely, you could understand that. But before that, you'd be interpreting it through your own lens of interruption is rude, right? So you would make an assumption from that. It happens very quickly. So think about the last time you lost your temper. I'm going to assume everybody has at one point or another. The last time you lost your temper, you were so upset you couldn't speak or you couldn't stop speaking, whichever was happening. That's what we mean by amygdala hijack. Now, if you back up and think about what happened before that, you can get an idea of what some of the triggers are. So when my teenager says, "You're ruining my life," and I've just, put a tuition down payment for a gazillion dollars, yeah, you bet I'm triggered, right? So we need to understand that process because it happens so quickly. We need to be prepared for it ahead of time. So I'm going to tell you more about the process in a minute, but I'm going to do a short exercise here now. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms with just two of you in each. And I'm going to ask you to give some thought to discuss this. What could be some of my triggers? And we promise if we know people's triggers, we're not going to use them against you. But I'd like you also to think about a client situation or maybe their ex, and what do you think were the triggers for them? So I think I have the power to do breakout rooms. I do. And I'll give you about 10 minutes to do this exercise. So identify your own triggers. What happened the last time I lost my temper? Typically, most of us, it's not one trigger. Once you get to be a professional, you figure out some ways to manage. So what were the 3, 4 things that happened beforehand that triggered? You didn't get any sleep, someone cut you off in traffic, then your client was arrogant, that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to do probably 2 to a room, and I'll pop into some of the rooms just to make sure everything's going okay, but I'll try not to interrupt you. Linda, do you want to go in a room too? Okay, all right, here we go. So 10 minutes and I'll pop in and out, so we'll be back at 3:18. Okay. I guess it didn't put you in one, Linda.
Oh, I think it's because of the numbers.
Okay.
So it's just you and me. That's okay. That's okay. You can pop in and out. I'll just hang out.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a few people that didn't join the breakouts.
Yeah, I see that. I wasn't sure if there's a way to make them.
There is, there is. If they're here, right? So I'll
Yeah,
just,
yeah. I think so because I see. I can't tell that because now they're all in breakouts, or a lot of them are.
yes. Yeah, so a lot of these folks have an invitation, but they haven't joined.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've been moving people around so they're with someone.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a room here I can put someone in. Move to room 2. Okay, so she's got another invitation. So if anybody unmutes and wants to know
Okay.
where, yeah, I'll come back and put them in. Okay, so
Alrighty.
first ones I'm in and they're doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just going room to room. That's why you see me.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. I have one person unassigned, but it's only 2 minutes left. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'll be right back. I'm going to check another group.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give a 1 minute warning.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
She's in Vancouver right now. She's like not doing anything. She's like doing work. And she's like, obviously, when you're on trips like that, you're
Lose it. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So, confidentially, what were some examples of some of the triggers that you found in your discussions? You can put in the chat or you can come off mute. Oh, reminder, we all need to remute ourselves. Thanks, Renee. Okay, Carl, please go ahead.
I think in our little breakout session, what we recognize is we can't stand stupid people.
Meaning that they refuse to educate themselves?
No, just I don't know. Just it gets to the point where you're so okay. So I did it for a personal, like what personally triggers me,
Yeah.
and for me, it's those people who do stupid shit repeatedly, and you're like, okay, and you expect different results.
Yeah. Yeah. Understood. Sometimes it's baffling. I know we used to watch a show called Better Call Saul, and then finally one day we just both lost interest. My husband said, "It's bad decision after bad decision. I just can't stand it." Right? Yes, absolutely. Okay, being interrupted, huge trigger for many people. Lying, huge for people. Being yelled at, yes. Unsolicited advice, yes. In my coaching training, they tell us that all advice is autobiographical. So just because it worked for you doesn't mean it will work for me. And I think it comes from possibly one of two places. One is good. I want to help you with your problem. The other is not as good. I want you to give you the solution to the problem so you'll go away and stop telling me about the problem. So either way, it doesn't allow the person agency to think it through for themselves. So we'll come back to that. Interruptions, yes, totally. Being taken for granted, undervalued, no respect. Yes, absolutely. Many people in organizations would say that's part of what their issues are. It is sad when all people don't have the wisdom we have. Well, I'm a firm believer that more knowledge for many people would help in a lot of situations. And this is why I'm feeling like we should be teaching conflict resolution skills like starting in kindergarten. Help me to help you. Yes. Carl, are they saying that, or are you saying if we could just work together, I could help you?
That is a Terry Maguire. I think it's a Maguire film, right? Where
Yeah.
you got Tom Cruise in there. Help me, help you. Like just let me help you, right? And sometimes you just want to look at your client like I've said I don't know how many times I've looked at a client who just gets so hung up on numbers. Like, dude, stop paying me.
Yeah.
I don't want your money anymore. Stop paying me.
Yeah.
But no, it's kind of funny because you mentioned that that aspect of learning these traits, and I know like Renee, in our breakout room, Susan and I were kind of talking about is the fact it's a repeat. No one knows how to communicate. They don't know how to communicate with their finances, so their finances go screwy. They still don't know how to communicate about it, so they yell and scream at each other. And what's the answer? Let's get divorced.
Right.
Sounds like a great idea. Why don't we learn to communicate when we're in school? I don't know about the rest of you, and I'd love to have a poll here. Who here remembers how to calculate the area under a curve? And have we ever used it in life? And yet every one of us had to do it in school, but basic finance we never taught.
Yeah, so true. So we're adding finance and conflict resolution skills to the curriculum, and I think it would be an improvement. Okay, so absolutely true. Let's see. Being disrespected, lack of compassion. Yeah. Being dismissive, lol emoji for the earlier one. Okay, so those are things that trigger us. We can, I think, assume some of those same things will trigger our clients, that the 9 out of 10, but the 10th one is going to be triggered sooner, easier by smaller stuff that may seem to you like not consequential. So common triggers of difficult behaviors in conflicted situations, rejection, a hit to personal status or identity. So for example, if your community thinks of this couple as the perfect couple and then they get divorced, and then people helpfully say, oh my goodness, I didn't think it would happen to you two. And that's people they're taking a hit to their ego with that kind of comment. Um, Having it public that people are disagreeing, that's another hit to ego. Um, Whatever is proposed as a solution doesn't meet the high conflict person standards for whatever reason. It hasn't taken account. Well, I'm thinking of a famous scene from the movie War of the Roses, where they will not give up the house. They just dig in, both of them, but they take out the architectural drawing and they divide the house in half, his half and her half. And Danny DeVito, who's the divorce lawyer for Michael Douglas, he says, "Are you crazy? This is crazy what you're doing." And Michael Douglas says, "No, no, no, it's not, because I'm winning. I got more square feet." And I think that's that's to Carl's point about what are we really focusing on here? Good movie. The salmon. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The person is threatened in their public image. So maybe so for example, a very high profile relationship that went south, I don't know where it is now, is one of the wealthiest people in Canada. His wife ran away with Katie Lang for a few years. And I mean, he was rumored to be tough guy, oil and gas billionaire. And so I'm assuming that was a huge hit to status. Scott, you're unmuted. Did you want to add something?
No.
Okay. They don't want the divorce in the first place. Yeah, maybe one does and one doesn't. Yes. I went to a presentation by relationship coaches here through my coaching federation, and they had originally set up shop as divorce coaches. But they found, and again, to Carl's point, they found that when people were taught some communication skills, that some of them would get back together. So I thought that was interesting. But narcissistic injury, this is where someone really reacts to what you might not think would be a break in a relationship, but they're just done. So some relationships, for example, can recover from infidelity, others can't. And that's when one spouse is like, "Oh, no, I'm done. I'm not considering any kind of reconciliation." So if those things are going on in a situation and you know the person's already triggered and already upset, here's what's happening. When we get triggered enough, we start to lose the blood in the area of our brain that governs logic. And this can happen very quickly, within seconds. And literally what's happening physiologically, your blood pressure is going up, your heart rate is going up, the blood is going from the logic area of the brain to the emotional area of the brain, which unfortunately is less developed, less developed as far as we know it, and reacting physiologically. I don't know if you had, when you talked about the things that triggered you or the last time you lost it. For me, somebody who presents and talks a lot in my work, if I'm really upset, I can't speak. It's gone. Yeah, that's the indication. So we have to be aware that that could be happening for other people too. They can't think logically because they're embroiled in emotion. So if you don't understand what someone is proposing as a path forward, it doesn't make logical sense to you. It might be that they're using emotional logic. I'm winning because I got more square feet, right? I'm winning because I made her come to 6 more appointments, or I'm winning because I didn't give him what the new wife wants, or whatever. So here's the cycle that we go through. So this person that's higher conflict will react quickly, more quickly than you might expect, with what they call a mistaken assessment of danger. So maybe you didn't mean anything by saying, we'll go through your spreadsheet, and all of a sudden they're mad. They're mistaking this as a threat to them, and they'll react in an aggressively defensive way. So not say to you, "Pardon me, how do you mean?" They'll react with, "I'm out of here." They'll go the nuclear option. And then they get negative feedback for that, which leads to more bad behavior. So that's the cycle we want to try and break. Now this, I like this chart because it shows kind of the different intensities of emotion you can have. The one that I'm paying attention to is the red one: annoyance, anger, rage. So pay attention to what irritates you, because that's telling you what your values are. And if you can keep it at irritation or deal with the irritation, that is great. But it might be telling you something about what's going on for other people. And you want to catch irritation before it becomes rage, because that's a lot harder to reel back in. So what are the steps then? How do we do this? Noticing it first, like don't roll over what your gut instinct is telling you. I know you probably have deadlines, you got things you got to conclude, but if something's nagging you at the back of your mind, try to make space for that. The best way to get access to that section of the brain is to not be focusing on the thing. So go for a walk, do the dishes, talk to the dog, note and give time for that to surface. Say, you know, it really bugged me with how arrogant he was in that meeting. Just notice that. So then naming the emotion gets you back in charge of the logical center of the brain. And you can do this for other people as well. You can, but you don't know what emotion they're feeling. So my all-purpose get out of jail free card is, it seems like you're really frustrated with this process. And then they'll correct you. They'll say, yeah, I'm frustrated and I'm disappointed and I don't see a way forward. So that gets you talking rationally. Oh, we got the little one joining us. Okay, employ calming strategies. Make a calming statement, take a break, walk. Now, unfortunately, it can take us 2 to 7 seconds to get really triggered, but it takes about 20 minutes to calm down and get our heart rate and blood pressure back to normal. So if we can't take a break or leave a meeting, the best we can do is kind of the 4 deep breaths. If we could take a walk, that's the best. Breathing techniques. Yes, thank you. I'm just about to get to that. And please contribute whatever you have. And then choose a productive course of action. By the way, a key marker that things are not going the way they should be is an ad hominem argument, when it's about the person, not about the argument. You always do X. You're just like your mother. Those kinds of things are grenades in a situation, and they're meant to distract. It is often done because someone is feeling powerless and they're flailing, right? That could be an unskilled person. Or it could be a very skilled, manipulative person who knows what gets people's goat, knows how to hook you. Have you ever had that feeling you're being hooked? They know exactly what to say. I know I worked in a consulting firm where on my second day, I came in the morning and I said to one of the partners, "Good morning, George. How are you today?" And he said to me, "Do you have to be so bleeping perky first thing in the morning?" And I was literally shocked, like I was, oh. And then another partner smoothed it over by saying, "That was your safety lecture. Don't talk to George before he's finished his first coffee." Well, George continued like that. And, you know, I have 4 brothers. I should have known better to recognize a bully when there was one. But I finally said to him, "Why do you always tease me every day?" He said, "Because it always works." And so that was a real sort of, interesting. And so these things are meant to work to get you off track on something else. So now what I do in my head is I think, why this? Why now? What is this distracting from? And when things go on that I don't understand logically, I'm thinking, okay, what's the emotional need here? What's the issue being distracted from? We don't always know what that is, but let me give you a quick example. When President Trump was saying that the Canadian borders were leaking fentanyl in people, everybody was wondering, like, what? What is that about? It's more the other way around. Like we couldn't figure out the logic. Well, I think I know now. In order for him to have the executive power to raise tariffs, he had to declare a national emergency on fentanyl and people coming over the border. That's how he got around Congress and the Senate. So I didn't know that at the time. So what he was doing didn't make sense. Now it makes sense. He was just playing by the rules he set up in the game. Is that an example people can relate to? What, Trump lied? By the way, Bill Eddy, that I refer to as the source of a lot of my work here, he wrote a book years ago, before 2017, called Why Trump Won't Change. So anyway, I didn't read it. I just thought the title was prescient. So try not to let those personal attacks hook you, sidestep them and say, okay, regardless, here we are, and we need to finish this. So come prepared with a couple of those stock phrases. I have lots in here that I'll share with you. And I also have lots of handouts and things I can follow up with. But here's a quick visual tool, just if it's helpful to you in the moment. That the first sign that you feel like your heart rate's going up, you feel the tone in the room is rising. Okay, think stop and do the breathing 3 to 4 times. Take 3 to 4 breaths and then think. Research is mixed on whether it's 3 or 4 breaths. It's whatever you need to make that work in the moment. Okay, so what do I think is going on here? Do I need to call a break? What do I need to do? What are my thoughts? And I'm going to talk to you about key messages here shortly. And proceed to complete the conversation if both parties are calm, or if not, follow up later. So that's a stop technique that I got from one of my clients. Some other strategies. This put on a scarf. I hope you can see on the scarf where it says status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Those are some values that are almost universal. So if someone is upset and you don't know why, it may well be one of these. It's a good place to make a guess. So, and most often I would argue it's status or ego. So a validating statement. I believe we are both looking for a reasonable solution that addresses fairness. Okay, comment in the chat. Oh yes, muddying the water and playing the victim so often. Yes, Canada's treated the US so badly. Yeah. That is actually true, playing the victim card when this is where you see where one person is highly manipulative, and by the time the police get there, they're calm, and the person who was just abused is looking like the person who's off their rocker. So this is a really challenging dynamic, and again, very hard to deal with. So if you can take a break, if you can walk outside in greenery, that is the best. I realize I'm telling you this in Canada, but if you have an indoor garden, whatever you can do, that's very helpful. Sometimes you can't take a break because it will escalate things. But the thought here is, what if this confrontation escalates if we don't take a break? What are the risks? Okay, so any comments or anything before I go to the next thing? Okay, so I'll just share with you that the dialectical therapy movement has been really, really helpful, where and there's a big movement in executive coaching as well. There's a coach who focuses only on executives who show derailing behaviors. We kind of call him the jerk whisperer. I don't think he likes that title, but he has noticed, as maybe many of you have, that sometimes that high conflict person cannot hear feedback. So you're trying to explain to them why the agreement is set up this way, and they're upset. They can't hear it. And they hear your explanation as disagreeing with them, if that makes sense at all. It makes logic, and it doesn't make logical sense, but it makes emotional sense. So sometimes what we have to do is think about, okay, what's going on for this person emotionally? Why are they reacting? What is their brain telling them is the threat here? I know I have a really good proposal here. He hasn't seen the hundreds of others I have, but I know this is a really good proposal. Deep breath. Okay, how do I help this person calm down, if possible? And when he's ready to talk or she's ready to talk, how do I share this with them? So a lot of this involves using bridging language, like figuring out how do I address their emotions and help them feel that at least some of this is a win. So if it doesn't make sense, or if it seems stupid, it's maybe the logic, the emotional logic. So what are they telling you with that emotion? Anger is usually covering up fear or hurt. Well, maybe they're really hurt that their spouse left without telling them and packed up all their stuff. Could be any number of things. So some context for us to consider. For me, how long will I have to deal with this person? So if it's a professional relationship and there's X amount of time, that's very helpful because you know that at some point it's going to conclude. How hierarchical is this person? Will they listen to me, or do they need like a star to come in or something like that? This is important to me in job settings where I might be listened to more than anyone else because I'm an outsider. Alternatively, they might only listen to their boss. So that's why I put that in. How much do you need this person to cooperate? What other power do they have that I don't know about, or maybe I know about but can't influence? Maybe power over their kids. Maybe, they're the one with the money in the family. Whatever that is, I need to understand that. Need to keep clearly in mind what's in my client's long-term best interests, even if they don't really know, they haven't decided, or they're not there yet. And we can't always get there. We can't always make people choose the thing that's best for them. And that's heartbreaking. And it happens. Who and what and who does the difficult person care about, if anyone? We sometimes run into that. what is in their interests. So if we're making a proposal, how do we make it appeal to them and their stakeholders? Okay, stop me if any of this doesn't resonate. This comes from I also teach a course in negotiating, kind of like a negotiating for non-negotiators through the University of Calgary. And it's amazing how many people go to do their most significant purchases, car and house, really unprepared. Like they really haven't thought about the market. They haven't thought about what skills they might need in negotiating. And it doesn't go nearly as well for them as it could. Okay, so the interest is underneath, like, what is it that you need? So if I say, I want $500,000 for this house and I'm not settling for a penny more, and you know the going rate for that house in that market is 400,000. Okay, now we're seeing a position, which usually comes first vehemently and with a value attached. But what's the interest underneath? Well, I feel like my spouse is going to try to rip me off, so I got to set the price high. So there's fear underlying that. They want to get a fair price. They want to have enough to look after their kids, whatever it might be. So understanding that actually gives you more options. So clarifying interests allows for that creativity if you can get there. So you want a fair price for the house. Your spouse wants to haggle and, push you down, but maybe there's something you can offer them to get them off that track. So maybe you have no need for the family cottage. I don't know. I'm just making that up. That could be a very difficult battle. So does this intuitively make sense to people? Maybe you've already had training in this. Okay, any comments or questions? All right, I'll just keep going. Okay, so the other thing I've noticed over time, we can start out collaboratively as if we're in our own best interests. And then it can start to morph into a rights battle. Who is legally, morally, ethically, factually, historically correct? So here's the thing, interests, if it works for you and it works for me well enough, that's the most solid kind of agreement. If I feel like I'm not getting my interests met, then I will argue, look, here's what's right. Here's what the law says. Here's what the finance theory says. Here's what. If we're arguing over rights, it's binary. It's win-lose. Somebody's going to be unhappy in that scenario. So we have to recognize when that's happening. If it feels like we have no options, we've gone binary. We're trying to overpower the other person potentially. So coercive power is forcing through, violence or persistence or, who I know, some illegitimate means. Legitimate power is like, for example, when you go to the courts and a decision will be made, that's legitimate, but it doesn't mean necessarily that your interests will get met or that they'll get met in the order that you expect. So before we escalate to power to make a decision, try talking again at the interest level. So are we still keeping to the forefront what everyone involved need for the best outcomes now and longer term? So if you can keep talking about that, sometimes you can get back to it. Not always. Carl, please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, the interest thing is always interesting. That was an interesting. Oh my gosh, man! I just keep saying interesting there. That's brutal. Anyways, it's funny because I know during my intakes, I always let the clients know that that's what I'm trying to get to is what their interests are, and letting them also know that typically speaking, they don't want the same thing. So there's no point in arguing over everything. Tell me what your interests are. More than likely, your exes will have different interests, and very rarely do we actually have similar.
Yeah.
And only when we have the similar ones that we can start looking at, aspects of conflict. Sometimes if you perceive that someone might have a similar interest, you just start finding reasons to be difficult,
Yeah.
which is irritating. But I won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is irritating. It's surprising to me, though, how many people have no idea what we mean by interests. And they also haven't sorted their own interests out, if that makes sense.
So yeah, I've done this exercise for like decades now, where I try to figure out what their value propositions are when it comes to relation to money.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating having transitioned from being a financial planner to this world, that when I ask that question, it's this really simple question. If I give you 5 hours with unlimited resources, what would you do with your time?
Okay.
prior, if they weren't in this process, they have answers like crazy. But as soon as they're in this process, they freeze.
Yeah.
And they're like, is this a trick question? Like, do I have to say something about the family and the kids and make myself look good? Or do you actually want the real answer of what I really want to do with my money? And it's you watch them struggle with this until you kind of slowly tease them out, letting them know there's no right or wrong answer. And then they're like, oh, yeah, this is what I would do with my time. I'm like, okay, then those are your values associated with money, and
Yeah.
this is what we're looking at. Is so if you start arguing about other things, can I ask you that question? Is it really important to you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think getting to the values is critical. And I don't know if you find this typical, but I've certainly seen it where one is like counting the pennies and the other one is out spending. And my accountant said to me, my old accountant, he said to me, I wish I'd taken a degree in psychology, or I was given a dollar for every time I had a couple in front of me, including business partners, where one's a spendthrift and the other's a miser. Al, please go ahead.
When our kids were still at home, we'd play this, or we'd have this conversation around the dinner table, um, about what would, if you could figure out your career, what would you want? Would you want happiness or do you want money? And and we did that on purpose. My wife and I did that on purpose because we thought it was important to get them not to think in binary terms,
Yeah,
that life wasn't one or the other.
yeah,
Why couldn't you have both?
yeah.
And I think that's I use that illustration, that personal illustration, because I think people are at conflict with
Yeah.
with I'm not happy with my present life, but I really don't know what my next life will make. Well, how will that make me happy? Because people are looking for happiness and satisfaction, but for some reason, putting money into the equation, into the conversation, is maybe somehow dirty.
Yeah, yeah, that could be depending on their values around money. And they might not even know what those values are. So this is a process of discovery, but it's also a really tense time. You know, they're probably not sleeping, and so they're not at their best in any way. So excellent point. Thanks, Al. And also that thinking, that both either or thinking, again, under stress, people go even more to either or. You know, so helping them think in more holistic terms is very helpful as a skill. In terms of dealing with that difficult person, part of it is managing your own emotions so you don't get hooked by them. Um, and the only way I've been able to relate to some of the amazingly bullying types that I've dealt with is empathy for what their life must be like. They're constantly thinking about their status and who's going to help them and who's not going to be helpful. So I just have empathy for that. And often they behave in ways where they can't get what they want, which is really interesting. You know, all I ever wanted was a happy family. Well, then why did you spend all the money, or why did you, fool around, And anyway, so I noticed that. So if you can give them empathy, attention, as in listening actively, William Ury, who's one of the greats of the negotiating world, says if there's one common denominator behind all successful agreements, it's active listening. So, and I take that point as well from Mark Goulston, who's a psychiatrist and a hostage negotiation trainer. So he does hostage negotiation training and marital therapy, and he says the techniques are very much the same. It's just we have to listen longer and more deeply than we usually think we need to. Okay, respect as respectfully as you would treat others, and be prepared to have your limits tested. A lot of people in conflict don't hear words, they just see actions. So if they see you sitting quietly and calmly, that might actually tell them more than any words that you might say. Okay, thanks, Holly. Okay, so stopping the cycle of high conflict behaviors, and I put in many cases, you can't resolve them all. It depends on how conflictual the person is, whether or not they have a conscience. That's huge, whether their intentions are good or not. At the very least, though, you can unhook yourself and maybe even help your client unhook to say, look, their behavior tells you more about them than it tells you about you. It's not about you. Okay, so collaboration, these are all the skills you need, and these are ones we may not. And then to Al's point earlier, can we help people use both and language versus either or? And differ constructively and contribute positive bids. What do I mean by positive bids? I'll get to that in just a moment. So I'm sure you've taken courses in active listening, but I'm adding a rule here. Acknowledge the person's feelings. You can say the all-purpose, it sounds frustrating, tell me more, but to avoid giving advice unless you're asked. You may have already given your professional advice, now they're processing. So people will support the solution they've helped to build. I had a banker as a client, and he presented his high net worth client with a fantastic package of investments that would save this person, I don't know, thousands a year. And they turned him down because the previous lender had involved him in the process of calculating it, and he felt overlooked that he wasn't involved in it. So I'll just share that with you. And we saw earlier that unsolicited advice can be a trigger for people, right? Because they feel talked down to. Keep your open questions going, create options at the beginning of the process, and then narrow down. Closed-ended questions are fine towards the end. So use why as little as possible in any conflictual situation, because it tends to be interpreted negatively. I find I get more traction with the what questions. Help me understand what's your most important priority. What are the risks here? What are the benefits that maybe we haven't seen? And then here's where I was going to talk about the bids. This is from the Gottman Institute. They have fantastic work on relationships. And in particular, the book, The Relationship Cure, it's great because it has a chapter for each kind of relationship you might have, like romantic, but also sibling and workmate and so on. And their work has found, by the way, they can watch a couple on videotape for 10 minutes and predict with over 95% accuracy how long that couple's going to be together. And what are they looking for? They're looking for the good behaviors, shared humor, and how they react to what are called bids. So I can see Scott here on my monitor, so I'm picking on Scott. But let's say Scott and I have desks beside each other, and I'm going to the cafeteria, and I say, hey, Scott, I'm going to get a coffee. Can I get you one? That's me making a bid to keep our relationship going. People do this all the time without realizing it. Scott has 3 choices. He can accept my bid. He said, yes, thank you, double, double. Or he can still accept my bid by saying, oh, I just got myself one, but thank you. That's still accepting, right? He can respond with hostility. He can say, do you think I'm not capable to get my own coffee? Or he can ignore me and keep typing. And it turns out that the ignoring is the worst for the relationship. And that during the day, we make a lot of positive bids, and that keeps our relationship strong in conflict. And just to share that the Gottmans did a study with conduct disordered children in Australia. And before they did any interventions, they cataloged the number of positive bids that these kids had in a day from adults in their life, parents and teachers. They were getting 1 positive bid to 13 negative bids every day. So they worked with the parents and teachers instead to change that ratio, and their behavior improved. I'll have to let my wife know. Okay. That book actually helped me. I thought I had great relationships, but I started following some of the things they suggested, and it made a huge difference for the better. And I discovered it just in time for the teen years. So the 4 worst behaviors: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, where I'm not going to answer, I'm not going to do my part of the process, I'm not even going to look at you. Those are the worst. And sometimes you can't proceed with those behaviors in place, so you just have to proceed around them somehow. Okay, so antidotes. If people are starting to criticize, gentle redirection. If there's a mistake in the process, I've learned how, and any of you that have been in a long-term relationship probably learned this. Okay, I understand there were some misunderstandings at the beginning, including my own. So then you model, again, taking that responsibility. Acknowledge where people have done the right thing and have come some distance the right way, and keep yourself and everybody else as calm as you can. Stonewalling is the hardest. I think it comes from early human instinct to be part of a community. And this is what old religious orders use as well as their key method of keeping people in line is shunning. So we want to be aware of how powerful that is physiologically and, keep ourselves as calm as we can. I'm not saying this is easy. Couple of quick tools here for you. Any of these situations, go prepared with a really concise key message, because if it gets conflictual, you can keep redirecting back to that key message. And this Kuba tool I found has resonated with my clients over time. And it means, what do I need to know? What do they need to know? What do they need to understand? What do they believe? And what do I want them to do? What's the action? So here's the information. Here's why it's important to you and to me, or just to you. Here are the benefits to you, the value to you. If they don't believe in it, they're not going to act. So if they don't know, they don't understand. If they don't understand, they don't believe. If they don't believe, they're not going to act. So that's why this structure, I just find that helpful. And I put a little worksheet in here for you, so I can send these out to you afterwards. And then having stock questions and phrases available. I have a 4-page handout if anyone wants this, but there's quite a few in this presentation, but happy to send my handout. So a couple that I use a lot. What is best case, most likely, and worst case works really well for people who are catastrophizing, envisioning the worst possible outcome. It gets them to think through what are the different ways this could work out, and it calms the brain down because it gives you alternatives for each situation. What have you done in the past that has worked? References the person's prior success. So that's always a good thing to do. And to disagree politely, first emphasize where you agree. Check back on assumptions because we may have changed them. Work really hard not to even hint at blame, because then it just engages defensiveness. One of my favorite ways to disagree is, I agree with you to this point. It's at this point I'm having some issues. And then that's on the previous page. So, and I take accountability for it. I don't understand this part of it. And then bridging language. I think I understand your dilemma. I empathize. And not offering a solution, but let's see what we can come up with that would be helpful strategies. So that's another skill to develop, or a few phrases to say. So here's my summary of disagreeing constructively and bridging language. I disagree with you. Here's where I follow the reasoning. Here's where I have some trouble. It's your fault. Change that language to contributing factors, which is also true, but way less loaded. But or however, but acts like a verbal eraser, erases everything you said earlier. So I understand your rationale, and I see that we've offered something completely different. Here's what I think we need to look at. And a trigger for me is, I'm sorry, but, because it's for sure going to be followed by something that's controversial that you're actually not sorry about. Like the leader that came to my respectful workplace workshop in an oil and gas company, came late and announced to everyone, I'm sorry, but if this is one of those workshops where I can't say Merry Christmas, I'm not having it. So, and fortunately I have a sense of humor, and I laughed and said, no, you can still say Merry Christmas, but you might learn a few other ways to say it. Okay, and you might learn a few other ways. And then this gradients of agreement tool, I use a lot with groups, but you can use it with individuals as well. And it just kind of says, where are you now? So we've got this proposal. Which pieces do you think, okay, those are good, but which pieces are showstoppers? Or what could we do that would move you further to endorsement? What are the things we would need to do? So I have that as a separate tool as well. So that's what I have for you today. I have a summary here shortly, but I would just, if you could put in the chat, if there's anything here that was a good takeaway for you, that would be really helpful. Some things to add to what you're already doing, anything you might stop doing, and any other takeaways or observations, that would be great. And just while you're doing that, I'm just going to summarize conflict and its causes. So we covered a little bit, just a light touch on that. Understanding difficult behaviors and personalities, dealing with them. What is the context? What mindset should I have? What are some of the skills, like knowing what the triggers are, managing your own emotions, and some of the tools? What is the stop tool? What is the Kuba tool? What are gradients of agreement? Thank you. Oh, thanks, Diane. And then I put some references in here, But the most useful one, I've got my cursor on, I don't know if you can see that, highconflictinstitute.com. Super useful resources. I think you all have my email. I'm on LinkedIn as well. If there's anything else I could provide for you, any other reading or if short discussion would be helpful, I would be delighted to do that. So thank you very much for your time and attention. And there's still people here. And I know what time of the day it is for those of you in Toronto or in Eastern time. So thank you very much for this opportunity. You've made me rethink a bunch of things from a completely different lens. So I appreciate that. And I'll stick around in case there's questions or comments. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I know it's actually hard to pick which things out of the presentation because there was actually excuse me, there was actually a number of things that I've written down that I'm going to work on implementing with people. I actually started my day with a most difficult client this morning, so I was challenging myself to stay calm and so that I would be in a good space to do the work today with the presentation. So I definitely have written down some things to use. So really appreciate it. And I'm sure everybody has some thoughts that they'll implement as well.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you. And thanks, Linda, for setting this all up. And yeah,
Yeah, well, you're
appreciate
very
that.
welcome. And thanks to everyone who attended today. I think that we provided you with some things that you can put into your practice and maybe some things you need to research some more. And we'll be sending you various bits of some things that are more than what you saw today that are backup information that the presenters provided us.
Yeah. Yeah, I have some to send you as well, Linda, and I'll send you a PDF of these slides.
Oh,
Because
excellent.
of course
Yeah.
I've made changes since we last talked. So
Yeah, I know that's perfectly wonderful. Okay, great.
okay, excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
I'll
thank
unmute, but if anybody wants
Okay.
anything, I'll be here.
Yeah, great.
Bye.
Well, bye-bye. Have a great week.
You as well. Bye bye.